Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Thank you for staying with us. It's time now for the week that was. Let's take a look at the top stories that made headlines around the globe this week. We start with amazing developments in the United States, where President Donald Trump just last night said Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky overplayed his hand during their extraordinary Oval Office clash, accusing his visitor of wanting to drag out the conflict with Russia. "I want a ceasefire now." Those were the words Trump told reporters while departing the White House for his Florida estate, saying he wanted fighting in Ukraine to end immediately. The U.S. president accused Zelensky of looking for something that I'm not looking for. He's looking to go on and fight and fight and fight. The Oval Office face-off came after Trump said Ukraine will have to make compromises in a truce with Russia, which has occupied swaths of Ukraine, destroying cities and towns along the way.
We had a meeting today, as you know, with President Zelensky, and I would say it didn't work out exactly great from his standpoint. I think he very much overplayed his hand. They should have an immediate ceasefire. That was the other thing he didn't want to do about ceasefire. A ceasefire could take place immediately.
Well, Vimba, it's good to have you on the show.
It's good to be here on a weekend.
On a weekend, I know that's very different. But let's get straight into it. A lot of things, just even before we came, we were talking about all the different things that have happened this week. But definitely what happened yesterday on live television during this sit-down meeting between the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, and the president of the United States, as well as the vice president of the United States, J.D. Vance, really had the world in shock. He had me in shock. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And you know what really stood out to me, I think initially, was the difference in the meetings that was had. Because initially, when President Volodymyr Zelensky got to the White House, he had a meeting with a bipartisan delegate, and that meeting actually went really well. You know, there was a press conference that, an interview that was held after the meeting where the conversation seemed to be as if we go ahead with this ceasefire deal, you know, we support you. The United States is, you know, stands firmly behind you. And then we see in direct contrast that meeting between, you know, the two presidents, where initially it seemed as if there was a bit of a history lesson that was being given. And I could see the point of view of Zelensky, where he was saying, you know, we've had this issue as far back as 2014. We've seen President Putin renege on his on the deal even when Obama was in, you know, Obama was there, even while Trump was in power. And then we saw what happened even while Biden was trying to see what he could do to elevate the problems between both countries. And then what you immediately saw was J.D. Vance, who seemed as if he had been waiting for this moment to step in. And when we think about, you know, the certain points that were put out, it has been shown, even in the media, that a lot of those things actually came from the talking points that we've been seeing coming out from Russian media. The fact that he kept reiterating that he has never said thank you. He doesn't say he has never said thank you before, which is untrue. He said that, you know, the United States government has given about $350 billion worth of you know, military and worth of weapons. It's about $180 million. And then, of course, that back and forth, which almost seemed as if the president was trying to just force that, you know, peace deal on Ukraine. But what is really important to note here is the fact that if we have a president in the past that has not committed to other peace deals, what is going to make this time different? But Trump said it's because he respects me. He's going to listen to me. So at this point, even with the body language of Zelensky leaving the White House yesterday, it did seem as if there was still some tension there. And at this point, you know, Keir Starmer, who is the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and was already had a meeting with Donald Trump, I think a couple of days before, is having a security briefing in the UK following this, because there's already been reactions across Europe, because if it seems as if the body language of the president might be leaning towards, might be favoring another country. So at this point, he said something, and I'm going to end with this. He said, you're playing with World War III. And he said, you have the cards. And there was something that Zelensky said. He said, this is not a card game. These are people's lives. These are my people. And I'm here to make sure I defend the rights of my people. So it's up to these two leaders, and of course the leader of Russia, to make sure that this does not end up being World War III, and everything is done to prevent the further loss of lives and property in that area.
Absolutely. It's such a complex issue, Shaitan, and there's so many different perspectives to take when one is looking at it. Of course, yes, we did see that Zelensky yesterday did storm out without signing that minerals deal that everybody was anticipating, highly criticized deal as well. But I always go back to the genesis of this issue, which is, I think what we're seeing are the pitfalls of what happens when a country allows itself to be used for a proxy war. If you go back to the real genesis of this, the issue here is around NATO and how NATO was positioning itself within the region. There is no way Russia is going to allow NATO in its backyard. Recall that NATO already has a very difficult past and a very difficult story when it comes to the East European, the Slavic former Soviet states. What happened in Yugoslavia concerning NATO when NATO bombed Yugoslavia because of issues happening with Kosovo is still very, very fresh in the memories of many people. So the concern of having a NATO who's bombarded, in the interest or under the guise of fighting for the rights of those in Kosovo to have their own country, bombarded the whole of Yugoslavia, went into Serbia, and killed those who had nothing to do with the issue. So it's rational that Russia would not want a NATO in their backyard stationed in Ukraine. Now, some people are saying, well, this is more about Putin's wish for expansionism and his romanticism with wanting to regain the Soviet empire as it used to be. So there's two sides to look at it. However, when you look at the exchange that took place yesterday between President Donald Trump, his vice president, and President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, it was a shame because all three parties were wrong. Diplomacy is what we call the skillful and careful management of international relations. All of them were guilty yesterday because we did not see any management. There was no diplomacy at play yesterday. J.D. Vance accused President Zelensky of trying to litigate the issues before the media. Now, one asks, if this is what is happening live before the media, you can only imagine what's happening behind the scenes. Now, as somebody who's experienced with the Slavs and those of East Europe and those who come from East Europe, one thing I can say is that they're extremely proud people. And one thing you dare not do is dare an East European, because he becomes very proud and defensive. And I saw that nature just kicking. It just kicked it. It's like a personality trait.
He was trying to calm himself.
He was trying to calm himself.
He was trying to really be, quite calm. And I like the way he handled it, because if he had met Trump with that same energy, it could have really gone worse.
You can't compare Ukraine and the USA. At the end of the day, we know that the USA wields the power in this. It's not nice to hear. It's not a nice reality, which is why I said that it's the pitfalls of allowing yourself to be used for a proxy battle, is that yesterday he now became exposed. Yesterday he was demystified, and it became clear that actually you're just a pawn in this game. And that's what Donald Trump and J.D. Vance reminded him of. Also, yes, as much as he has denied that his ratings have not dropped to 4% as Donald Trump claimed, his ratings have dropped from about 90% to 50%. So within Ukraine, people are also wondering what Zelensky is doing to bring this war to an end. Well, we continue to watch. We do hope that there will be a return to diplomacy, not more of what we saw yesterday, because that type of tension is not healthy and does not encourage world peace that we're all striving towards.
The president did make a comment towards the end of it. He said this would make for good television. You can't take the reality TV star out of President Donald Trump.
Once a reality star, always. Well, on to other news. Much earlier in the week, President Trump shared a bizarre AI-generated video on his Truth Social. This video depicted a transformed Gaza Strip reimagined as a luxurious resort destination named Trump Gaza. The video also features golden statues of Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu lounging on a sunbed, sipping cocktails. Let's take a look.
To set you free, bringing the light for all to see. No more tunnels, no more fear. Trump Gaza is finally here. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new light. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza #1. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new light. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza #1.
Well, closer to home here in Nigeria, the developments have been no less extraordinary, starting with Senator representing Kogi Central District, Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, accusing Senate President Godswill Akpabio of making inappropriate advances towards her during a past visit to his country home in Akwa Ibom State. On Friday, Senator Akpoti-Uduaghan was a guest here on Arise News, and in the course of that interview recounted the alleged incident, which she said took place last December, a day before both of them marked their birthdays. That allegation comes in the wake of a heated session in the Senate last Thursday, when Akpabio ordered sergeants-at-arms to remove her from the chamber following a dispute over sitting arrangements. Before this time, the Kogi senator, one of only 4 women in the entire Senate, had slammed a 100 billion naira lawsuit on the Senate president for allegedly defaming her. Here is what she said earlier about her dispute with Senator Akpabio.
We were in his house in the Kotek. Then we all moved to his house in Uyu, which was about 8 p.m. And he held my hand and said he wanted to show me around his house. My husband was walking behind us, just 3 of us. We're walking around from room to room. And then he got to this particular sitting room, and he said, "Do you like my house?" I said, "Of course, sir. Every room, beautiful, nice interior, quality taste." He said, "Now that you're a senator, I'm going to create a time for us to come spend quality moments here. You will enjoy it." At that point, I just pulled away, and I was like, I don't really understand what exactly that meant. And the Senate president is allowed to counter that.
Well, in the meantime, the wife of Senate President Unoma Akpabio has filed multiple lawsuits at the High Court of the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, against Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, alleging a breach of fundamental rights and defamation over allegations made by the senator against her husband during an interview here on Arise News. Mrs. Akpabio had earlier accused Senator Akpoti-Uduaghan of lying and creating content for personal gains. She described her husband as a disciplined and jovial person who is often misinterpreted.
Unfortunate accusation, I'll rather call it unfortunate, is very demeaning because that is a family. We knew the husband before the husband married her. We've always known the man. They were very good friends, or they are still very good friends. So I really don't understand where this is coming from. And I believe that for somebody to go and make such an allegation, there must be a discussion at home. There must have been a sanction or an approval. Or you're going to say this, go ahead and say it. And if the approval has come from the husband, our friend, I believe that he would have spoken to me, because we are close. And then if the wife had complained about such a thing, and he still comes, and he's normal, there is no man you will tell, that the wife will tell, it's your friend harassed me. I know how you men behave, that will not frown. First of all, the attitude towards the person will change. But this attitude never changed. And if you're talking about the house, we don't have any house in Ikorebire. Ikorebire is a local government. We are from a Senudim local government. Our country home is in a Senudim, in Okana. And I didn't hear anything about Okana. We have a beautiful home in Okana. If you're talking about Uyo, house in Uyo, I'm always there. I own a school. I'm always in my school. And when I finish at the school, I go home. So the home you are talking about, I'm always there. The Senate president is a very, very responsible man and disciplined. As a governor, the number of women we had then in government, I don't think any government has had that number of women. So in Akwa Ibom, when he was a governor, a lot of women were involved in governance. And none of them, not one, ever said something like this. In the past, we've allowed people to get away with a lot of things. And he will always tell me, if you can't stand the heat, leave the kitchen. I'm here to serve my people. They will throw mud at me. I said, but this mud is becoming too much. Why can't you do something? So I'm now the one going for a legal address.
Yes, quite an eventful past 24 hours we've had, yeah, and a very complex issue.
I mean, I think I'll take it from here. Last week, when as of this time last week, myself and Steve were having the conversation about the outburst that had happened in the Senate. I think it was the Thursday before, and in going back and forth, I said something. I said, it's quite obvious that breakdown of law and order, the back and forth that happened in the House of Assembly that particular day had nothing to do with the seats, even though that is probably what the straw that broke the camel's back. But there was definitely something that led up to it. And who knew that a couple of days after, Senator Natasha would be on the Arise platform actually telling her side of the story. And that is an important thing to note here as well, that this is her side of the story. She's entitled to say what happened to her, to be able to name who she believes is her, who made passes at her or sexually harassed her. Now, in this situation, when we look at the sheer number of women in the House of Assembly, I was watching the interview you had with Senator Kingwe yesterday. And, she had made, certain points about the fact that, she wasn't aware. She had tried to reach out to Senator Natasha and, and all of that. And the fact that she said something about, why are we fighting over seats? And I bring this up because you made a reference that definitely struck a chord with me, and I believe struck a chord with so many people that watched that interview, where you spoke about Rosa Parks and the influence or the significance of her fighting for that seat on that bus on that very day. Now, in this situation, the references might be slightly different, but it ties back to the fact that she is fighting for something. She is fighting for her rights. In that day in the assembly where she mentioned Order 10, she had said it because that was my lifeline. That was the only chance. That was the only way that I would have been able to express myself. When it comes to matters of sexual assault or sexual harassment or accusations, alleged accusations of this sort, it's always a he said, she said situation. It's always, oh, how can you prove it? How can we be sure that you're not telling a lie? When someone makes this kind of accusations, what needs to be done is a proper, thorough investigation. Fine, Akpabio's wife has come out to say, he's a good man, he would never do something like this. And I mean, that's her husband. She's expected to defend this person. I think she has come out to ask for a 250 billion naira defamation lawsuit. but it shouldn't end there. And I say this because there was something that she mentioned. She said there has never been an accusation against my husband before. And it's rather unfortunate to say that that in itself is untrue, because even on this same morning show, on this same seat, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, and in an interview with Rufai Oseni, Dr. Ruben Abati, and Tundu Abiola, there was another accusation by the ex-NDDC boss at the time, who had come out to say that she had in fact even slapped the now Senate president because of the same issue. There is no smoke without fire. I was not there with them that day in the chapel. I was not there with them that day in the house. I don't know exactly what happened, but it should be taken very seriously when a woman steps forward and says that the reason why I am being bullied, she likened it to the sex for grade situation and said, I feel that I am being vilified because I have not been able to fulfill sexual favors. That is not something that we should still be hearing from our leaders at this point in time.
Especially not from the hallowed chambers. But of course, as you've said, and as we continue to reiterate on this platform, these all continue to be allegations. Yes. At this point. Some of the notable developments, of course, is the response, or rather the reaction from Mrs. Akpabio. And many might say that, well, we want to hear from the man himself. We understand as a family woman, she's doing what most family women would do, which is to defend the honor of their family, and that's notable in its own sense. But I think it's important that we don't deal with this issue by attempting to gag it, because some of the suits that have been filed include a cease and desist with regards to discussions of this issue from Natasha Akpoti, further discussion and sharing of this issue, which is a concerning development, because yes, you may not believe her, but for me, this really took me back to the Me Too movement of 2017. Not because of the Me Too itself, which of course was women who were standing up to powerful and influential men, but it was more about the motto, the slogan that came out, which said, believe women. Now, does believe women mean that any woman who comes out and says anything she has to say means that we should immediately take her side? No, that's not what it means. I want to take a quote from former President Joe Biden that he said when the Me Too movement was at its peak and people were protesting against Brett Kavanaugh. He said, for a woman to come forward in the glaring lights of focus nationally, you've got to start off with the presumption that at least the essence of what she's talking about is real. Whether or not she forgets facts, whether or not it's been made worse or better over time. What does this mean? This means that we would like to hear from the Senate President Godswill Akpabio. We would like for him to come and clear his name, if that be the case. I think, yes, it's wonderful to see that there's support from many quarters. But in this instance, what is valuable and what is going to make this issue get to a speedy resolution is he coming and addressing this and saying, well, this is the nature of our relationship. This is where things went wrong, and settle the issue once and for all. It's very important because, as has been highlighted, there are only 4 women in the Senate. Many are saying that, well, what will happen next? Is Senator Natasha going to be victimized? Are we going to see her being suspended? Are we going to see her political career being brought to an abrupt end by her boldness to come out and make these accusations? Well, that stands to be seen. However, what we have seen is Senator Ireti Kingibe, who, mind you, has also experienced what many would call the wrath of the Senate President in that plenary when she was having issues with the Minister of the FCT, Nyesom Wike. And the women rallied around her, and the nation rallied around her. So many people stood by her when she stormed out of the Senate that day because her motion would not be heard. And people pleaded on her behalf, and she eventually came back and the issue was resolved. So it's unfortunate to see her not take the motherly role, as she says she is old enough to be their mother. We'd like to see her take more of a motherly role in this issue so that things can be resolved in an amicable way. Yes, you might think that the issue of sitting is trivial, but it's just an expose of the bigger frustrations, the bigger issues happening within the Senate. I'm glad later we'll be speaking about whether there are systemic issues happening in the Senate, because in this day and age, we shouldn't have 4 women in the Senate. You look at Rwanda, for example, tiny nation of Rwanda has more than half of its legislation represented by women. The Constitution prescribes for certainly more than 4 women to represent us in the National Assembly, in the Senate specifically. So these are the things that we need to unpack. However, in all of this, we stand by the truth. And we stand by justice. And we hope that besides all of the supporters and proxies of the Senate President coming to speak on his behalf, which we appreciate immensely, it will be important for him to lend his voice, because this is an issue that is far too critical, far too important for us to shelve it and gag it with a defamation lawsuit.
Very well said, Vimbai. Let's move on now to our next story. It has been more drama and chaos in the tussle for the Speaker of the Lagos State House of Assembly. The impeached Speaker Mudashiru Obasa returned to the Assembly yesterday, still claiming to be Speaker. At the same time, security aids for his successor, Lagos State's first female Speaker, Mojisola Miranda, were withdrawn. In her absence, Obasa attempted to conduct legislative proceedings, compounding the weeks-long battle for the Speaker's seat. From Lagos, Arise chief correspondent Tokunbo Yetunji narrates the day's events.
It is the first time that Mr. Obasa is showing up in the Assembly since the leadership crisis in the Lagos State House of Assembly began earlier in January. But his appearance here today brings with it some apprehension. There are claims that security personnel guarding the Assembly complex, as well as those of the Speaker Mojisola Miranda, were withdrawn prior to his arrival, while he is escorted by heavily armed personnel into the premises. But around the vicinity of the Assembly, there is a detachment of more security personnel that restricted movement into the complex, as placard-bearing supporters of the lawmaker, mostly from his Agege constituency, turned the arena into a carnival ground. Inside the Assembly complex, there is some drama. Mr. Obasa, with some of his aides, seen making their way up and attempting to conduct a legislative session, while the other group gathers at a point outside the chamber. Both groups speak to journalists, with the one loyal to Mrs. Miranda saying Mr. Obasa remains impeached.
We are shocked to see what is happening, despite the fact that this is Lagos. This is the center of excellence. This is where everything starts and it stops. We've been law-abiding. We've not gone out of our way. We've not done anything against the state or against anybody. But we also want to be respected, to be given our dignity, to be shown that we were elected. So I'm appealing to the leadership of our party that we cannot continue this way. We were embarrassed. So thank you, gentlemen.
We hereby reject Obasa. We reject Obasa.
Almost immediately after, Mr. Obasa also appeared before journalists to restate that the leadership change carried out on January 13 remains illegal.
I'm here. So as I'm here, it simply means the house is on. I've never been removed. There's nothing like impeachment. So I don't know what you are saying. I've said this openly.
Sir.
That everybody, remove, what is it called? Impeachment or whatever, or removing is not democratic and constitutional. But in doing that, to achieve that, you must follow the due process.
So what's next?
Obasa is the speaker.
His supporters re-echo the claim outside, sparking some jubilation among them. Thursday's development brings a neat twist to the leadership crisis rocking the State Assembly. Where the House goes from here remains unclear. Days ahead are certainly going to be interesting and critical in the life of the legislative arm in the state of excellence, Lagos. Tokunbo Yetunji, Arise News, Lagos.
Right. All right then. Today, like we've said, there's just so much going on. Yeah. You know what? This is just disappointing to me when we think about the back and forth, and the fact that this is even our first female speaker, and it's just being marred by this brouhaha. So the first thing that stands out to me is the fact that the whole basis of this back and forth between the two, former deputy speaker and the speaker that refuses to leave, is the fact that he's insisting that that voting process was done in his absence. However, it's been reiterated over and over again that by reason of Section 92, subsection 2, paragraph C, that if they deem fit by resolution of the House, supported by 2/3 members to remove the speaker, they don't have to give anybody a reason, and it can be done even while he's not there. Fine, he's made references to the two speakers that were there before him, that it was done while they were around. But that doesn't necessarily make it a caveat for what happened or for what took place. The fact that there's been the security apparatus that was signed to Mojisola Meranda over there, for some reason, was taken back. They've said that it was because of administrative issues. They had to. They were auditing conveniently on the same day that Obasa would make his appearance to the House, with his own security personnel now reinstated. You know, in all of this, who really suffers? It's the people of Lagos who are waiting for their lawmakers to actually get their acts right and start to look at the issues, so many issues that that Lagos State needs to tackle, and make sure that we can actually continue to be the center of excellence, like Obasa rightfully said in there. At this point, it's going to have to go to court, because it seems as if there just can't seem to be an amicable resolution. I find it disappointing. The law is definitely on the side of Mojisola Meranda. I wish that Obasa, who has been the speaker for 10 years, what else do you want to do? And it's not that you've been told to leave the House. You're just no longer the first among equals. Now there's somebody else who has taken that position, who has been sworn in. So to see this display and to see, setting some of his supporters on there with this ongoing struggle definitely reflects the deep political divisions with our state's ruling class. This forceful attempt by Obasa to reclaim his seat signals a serious constitutional crisis, where legal and democratic processes are being challenged by people in power. Now, despite the refusal, or rather the refusal of Obasa to step down, we're also, like I said, we're looking at the instability in the Assembly's delayed legislative work that is affecting governance and service delivery in the state. The lack of a decisive resolution is undermining public confidence in the democratic process. At this point, it's either going to be a political negotiation, it's going to be a legal battle, and even with the body language, we're seeing increased security tensions. I really hope and pray that it doesn't break down. It doesn't result in a breakdown of law and order. But this needs to be nipped in the bud as soon as possible.
Absolutely. I agree with you, Shaitan. You know, the first thing for me that comes to mind is the unsustainability of godfatherism in politics. Because what you build strong men as opposed to strong institutions. The institution has spoken, and they've done so resoundingly, overwhelmingly, and according to the rule of the law. They followed every single necessary procedure in order to achieve their end. But there are strong men and big men who are apparently bigger than institutions and bigger than the law. And they feel that they have the backing of even stronger and more important people, and they can always impose their will on other people. Now, initially, when this issue started, there were murmurs around the fact that this is a reflection of a fallout between shall I say, the impeached speaker, who is calling himself the substantive speaker, and the sitting governor, Governor Sanwo-Olu. However, there's been a vacuum of leadership because we haven't heard from the governor, nor have we heard from the president, as many people are saying that maybe this is a matter that, as he is somebody who is an elder where issues of Lagos State are concerned, they would have thought he would have waded in. And I think it's still premature for us to say that the president should wade in, to be honest with you. But the situation needs to be nipped in the bud because we can see that things are getting out of control. When you have armed men coming to invade, you have the inclusion of DSS, you have security personnel being taken away, you have the tension around this particular situation is very, very delicate. So it's very important for us to note, number one, what are we doing to safeguard the institutions? You can see that the majority of the lawmakers have taken a stand and they continue to stand by that decision. They want Mojisola Miranda. Well, Obasa feels that he still has a stake in this game and that is his rightful seat. And of course, he has gone to court. We'll wait to see what the outcome of that proceeding will be in the court. And we can't delve too deeply into that. But ultimately, what you have here is a situation where we need to respect the status quo while we wait for this process to play itself out in the judiciary. Now, of course, there are some concerns as well about the involvement of the judiciary, especially when we look at some other rulings here and there where people are saying, once the judiciary involved, does that mean that the will of the people will be circumvented? The judiciary has been central to a lot of the conversations that we've been having around political power plays in the past 2 years. So we really need to take a deeper look at what is happening inside the judiciary, and whether the judiciary is really doing the work that we expect it to do. Whether there is justice, whether there is fairness. I believe that this time around, one will be looking and waiting to see closely what the outcome of this will be. Is this about 2027 and the governorship run? Well, surely there are other ways to do that without using state apparatus. But as we saw in the case of Rivers State, these individuals, powerful politicians, do not abandon what they call their structures very easily.
All right, then, Mbai. Yeah. Very well said. Let's move on to the next story. The immediate former governor of Kaduna State in northwest Nigeria, Nasir El-Rufai, had earlier kicked off a very momentous week on Arise, your award-winning station, with a blockbuster interview during which he said that President Bola Tinubu was behind his being rejected for a ministerial nomination instead of the widely held notion that the National Assembly rejected his nomination for security reasons. The former governor, who is a steward of the ruling All Progressives Congress, said in his first interview since leaving office that President Tinubu initially recruited him to handle Nigeria's power sector before unexpectedly changing his mind. He spoke on a wide range of issues and challenged Tinubu to release the so-called security report that led to his disqualification.
We finally agreed that he would nominate me as minister, and there were certain conditions I attached to that. I think along the line, either the president changed his mind or something else, because please don't believe the story that the National Assembly rejected me. The National Assembly had nothing to do with this. The president didn't want me in his cabinet. He changed his mind. Whatever it is, frankly, I don't care. And I told him, and I moved on. And since I moved on, I've not said a word. I've not granted any interview. I've not commented on the government. But it is within my rights as a founding member of the APC, as one of the 34 people that signed the INEC form that got the party registered. It is within my rights to ask, why is my party not functioning?
Indeed.
What security? What was the security issue? I have been a governor for 8 years in one of the most difficult states in the country. Okay? I have been minister 20 years earlier. I've been in public life in the last 25, 26 years. What is the security issue? Where is the report? What about other ministers far less qualified, far less experienced, with huge controversies around them that scaled through because the president made a call? So please leave that aside. I don't want to focus too much on that.
Right.
The president is a human being. He is entitled to change his mind. And it's not an issue. And it is a job I didn't want in the first place. So the slightest opportunity I had, the security thing was a good thing for me because it enabled me to say, Mr. President, I'm gone. And I went on with my life. Now, since then, has anyone released that report? What is the security issue? What is this? What is that? Leave that. The only reason why I'm talking about this, Charles, is because anytime I make any comment about how the party is running or not running, or I visit a friend of mine, Tinubu's hacks go on, oh, it's because he didn't get a ministerial nomination. Guys, I was minister 20 years ago.
Well, in the first interview that he's giving, and of course, Trust Arise News to always get you those very top interviews there with Charles Aniogolu on prime time. And it's very interesting, let's say allegations or, things that he said at this point, revelations that he said at this point, saying that the president is directly responsible for him not making that ministerial appointment. And he's even gone a step further to say, I want to see the security reports that actually that says that I failed my security screening and has deemed me a diplomatic liability, as it were. A lot of things to take away from that particular interview. When we talk about, first off, what stood out for me was the political fallout and the internal APC crisis, where everything that is being said there, you can see that his comments highlight a deepening rift within the APC. His claim that the party has abandoned its founding values and no longer holds internal meetings underscores the internal dysfunction. There's also the allegations against Nuhu Ribadu, the accusations that he's attempting to destroy a position ahead of the 2031 presidential bid that appears to be politically motivated. Just a number of things there to take away from it, but we don't have enough time. I think what at this point is just a case of, well, I wonder if the president is going to respond, because his plate is full at this point.
I think if the president were to respond to each and every one of these issues, we wouldn't get anything done at all. And that's why it's so important to have the separation of powers that we do have in our constitution, because each level of governance is supposed to look after itself. Well, what do we say? Of course, several people are saying, would former Governor El-Rufai come out so boldly to say all these things if, in fact, he had the president had allowed him to take up that ministerial post? Because it's easy to cry foul when you've been left out of the equation, but when you're on the inside, often these conversations happen behind the scenes. So many people are saying that maybe it's a blessing that he was left outside, because there are several viewpoints and revelations, if we may call it that, that he has been sharing, and we hope to continue to hear from him with regards to this. But notably is the fact that so many things were said in that interview. 2027 is a very hot ticket. And it's clear that even within the APC, there isn't an overall consensus. Yes, we saw the NEC meeting where there was a vote of confidence on President Bola Tinubu, and it was declared that there would be no vacancy for 2027 in Aso Rock. However, we also know that former President Muhammadu Buhari was absent from that meeting. El-Rufai himself was absent from that meeting. And of course, Rotimi Amechi, former governor of Rivers State, was also absent from that meeting. So it makes you question what is happening inside the ruling party. What are the dynamics? We've also heard that after enjoying 2 years at his quiet homestead in Daura in Katsina, former President Buhari has moved back to his home in Kaduna. Of course, remember he'd said that he would retire in Katsina and enjoy a quiet private life away from politics. His return to Kaduna, which was met with plenty of fanfare, and he was welcomed back by Vice President Kashim Shettima, was very symbolic to many people, because it meant that he's coming back to get involved in the power play. Now, we've already seen sentiments coming from various quarters, various parts of the country, where some people are saying that 2027 should even be thrown open. There's no need for it to continue to go to the south. Let whoever's most competent, if it's a northerner, let it be. Well, these are very big discussions to be had. And I personally advocate that when it comes to respecting rotation, the rotation of power, yes, as much as it's a gentleman's agreement, maybe it's time for us to put it into the Constitution so that there can be justice and equity, because there's a reason why we went back to that formula. There's a reason why we stick to that formula. Is it that the formula has fallen apart? How do we choose the most competent person, especially given the fact that the votes are normally skewed in the northern part of the country? So many things to break down and so many things to reflect on following that interview from former Governor El-Rufai. We look forward to hearing more from him. I hope he'll grant more interviews, give us more revelation, let us know more of his thoughts and insights.
All right, then thank you so much, Ovimbai. That's